with Mike Brill, who is a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. And he's going to be talking with us today about his experiences with the F-16 as well as some things that he's doing now that are really exciting. So we're glad to have you with us today, Mike, and welcome to Green Spring. And your mom and dad are just doing wonderful. We're so glad that they mentioned it. And by the way, folks, Mike is the son of Will and Edna Brill, who are long-term residents here of Canterbury Square, who have done a tremendous amount of things here at Green Spring and helping residents do various things. And you're right in line for all that.
Well, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, great. You spent a long time in the Air Force, I understand.
I was commissioned in '79 and retired in 2011, so
okay.
Over 31 years.
31 years plus. All right. And Lieutenant Colonel?
Yes, sir.
During that time. And you flew F-16s.
I was really fortunate. The F-16 really wasn't even in my draw of my pilot training class. It was so new that it was not expected to be released to brand new lieutenants for almost a year, but they decided to start a little bit early, and I was one of the first lieutenants to get in the airplane.
Oh,
actually got to go to the factory in Fort Worth, pick one up, like getting your brand new car, and was fortunate enough to get into an airplane. It is a fabulous airplane. They call it the electric jet. And just like all the other electronics in the world, as technology's advanced, the airplane's been able to be significantly enhanced by taking advantage of the miniaturization of electronics. So the airplane, even today, is still one of the best in the world.
Yeah. And it's still being sold overseas too, right? To the other
phenomenal number. I was actually finished up. I worked in safety, and we went to the users group, and it was like a UN meeting.
Wow.
There's probably 8 to 10 countries in South America, almost all of Europe, most of the Southeast, Singapore, Taiwan, all are flying the F-16.
Wow. With your experiences with the Air Force, what was the most pleasurable?
It was a lot of work, obviously. So I'm not thinking pleasure. And the military has a way of taking all the fun out of it anyways. But really just, I guess, seeing the world, deploying all the different places that we went, both in combat and non-combat. I mean, being over to be in and around Iraq and seeing at that time what we were doing to make that country such a better place for the people that were still there was rewarding. But then again, just seeing Koreans. I mean, generally speaking, most of the places we went, we were welcomed with open arms, and people were happy to have us there. But it was just a wonderful opportunity to see the world.
Right. And you were a squadron commander?
Yes, sir. I was operations officer. Was the number 2 guy in the squadron for 5 years, and then the squadron commander for 2.
Okay. During Vietnam, a lot of combat?
No, I joined right after Vietnam.
Right after 79, yes. Okay. So.
The most of my instructor pilots were Vietnam pilots, so I listened to all those stories. Quite a different experience with those guys and that conflict and the temperature of the water in America as there is now. It's wonderful to see the American public behind the military the way they are now. That was not always that way in the 70s.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I can remember coming back during that era. So yeah, it's very nice to see the appreciation for the military and to hear people saying thank you for your service. Now.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really nice. So did you fly any combat at all, even Iraq, Iran,
oh, yes.
Desert Storm, those kinds of things?
Yeah. Unbeknownst to most of the public, from the period between the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, we were flying missions in both southern and northern Iraq, enforcing what we call the no-fly zone. And people are really aware of it, but we were pretty much being shot at every day. The Iraqis would hide 57 millimeter, which is kind of a Korea vintage cannon, and they would hide them in orchards. And because of the foliage, our targeting pods at that point in time couldn't see through the leaves.
Right.
And they would fire off 3 or 4 rounds every time one of us came by, and it would look just like the movies from 12 O'Clock High. You'd look out, you poop, 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 3 chocolate puffs would go off, and then we would have, if we could find them, we would be allowed to prosecute those targets. But we only had like a 10-minute window before they would shut it down. So that was going on, and I did that 4 times, and then I flew one of the first missions into Afghanistan about 3 weeks after the towers went down. Okay. That was a interesting 12-hour mission. Launch in daylight, switch to night vision goggles, and then fly back.
Wow.
And then I was in Iraq twice after the second Gulf War, supporting the forces over there. So total 7 deployments. Okay.
Question that I've been asked many times by different people is, what is a sortie?
A sortie's just a takeoff to landing.
Okay.
I think it's an Air Force term. I'm not sure if the Navy uses that.
Right, yeah.
The terminology is amazing. In the Navy, it's a section of fighters, and in the Air Force, it's an element. But a sortie's what our planners refer to as basically takeoff to landing.
Okay. And the most dangerous time in the plane is takeoff and landing, right?
Generally speaking, just because the aircraft is not at its performance curve, kind of akin to riding a bicycle. You get on the bicycle, when you're first starting, you're slow and wobbly, but then you get speed up, it's very comfortable. But then eventually you have to get off the bicycle and you got to go back into that slow. So you, as a little kid trying to teach them, it's that starting and stopping is the hard part. Very similar with airplanes also, because we lose our maneuverability and our performance as we're slow, 150 knots. Right.
You went in '79, went through OTS, or you
Air Force Academy.
Air Force Academy, right? Got your commission at that point in time, and when you first went in, Air Force Academy?
When you join the academy, you actually swear the same oath, the support and defend the Constitution, and you're under the UCMJ as far as legal, but you're not commissioned yet. So
and that's the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Yes, sir. Okay. So then, when you're actually finished, then you take the oath again. Now you're an officer in commission. So.
And so you got your commission when?
May of 1979.
Okay. Straight to a plane?
Straight to pilot training. The process takes a year. You start off in now what they call the T6 Texan. It's a tandem seat, front back, propeller driven. When I started, it was a T-37 Screaming Mimi, which is looks like little tadpoles, what it looks like. But you sit side by side, which the IPs liked it, the instructors liked it, because they could reach over and slap you. When they're behind you, they can't hit you in the head. But spend 4 months in the T-37 and then 6 months in the T-38, which is supersonic, high performance, and then. You, depending on your graduation order of merit, how well you do, you get first choice gets first airplane, which is where I was fortunate enough.
Congratulations, first choice, yeah.
Got the F-16, and I was in F-16 training 3 months later, and I got my first sortie November 4 of 1980, and my last sortie was November 3 of 2010. So it was exactly 30 years.
And you remember those dates very well, don't you?
I remember that first sortie pretty well. That was an amazing rocket ship. Getting that thing, flying out of Utah, beautiful blue sky, and it was like being on a roller coaster where you could control where it went.
And with an F-16, you're it, right? You have a back man?
Nope, one man, one motor, one
jet.
You hope it works.
One of the things that always impressed me with the F-16s is the climb that they had. I mean, it's just phenomenal.
It has still probably the best thrust-to-weight ratio, which means that the aircraft with a non-combat load, obviously not wing takes or bombs, but just fuel and a normal structured airplane, it varies over time, but roughly it's just under 30,000 pounds, but a full afterburner is over 30,000 pounds. So at sea level on a cool day, it can actually accelerate going straight up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just phenomenal.
I was a check pilot, which is meant when the airplanes had extended maintenance, they would have to do a shakedown flight. And there was 2 guys in each squadron that were certified for that. And the profile for that is because you're concerned about the engine, like we talked about, in takeoff and landing. So you take off, and it's a no ordnance, no stores, clean jet, and you throw it right in full afterburner, and you go from 0 to 30,000 feet in about 20 seconds.
Wow. And you're pulling how many Gs?
At the end of the run, when you pull up, that's not too many, really, that's about 5, but the airplane can pull up to 9 Gs, which, to put in a context, your head weighs about 20 pounds, so at 9 Gs, that would be like a 180-pound man standing on your head.
Right. And so your head's back in the seat, right?
No, actually, that's you're looking around, or else there's no reason to be pulling 9 Gs. The reason you're doing that, there's some guy behind you that you don't want to keep. You want to keep him out of there. So when you're doing that, you're twisted around, contorted, looking over your shoulder, pulling, which is it's a good thing we're sitting like this, because if you were any farther over, I couldn't look at you. Right. My neck only goes about 45 degrees left and right after all those G forces.
Yes,
so. The Gs it's really a defensive tool. We always talk about how many Gs you can pull, but ideally, I mean, as an instructor and having all the years and time in the airplane, my goal was to always come back with my G meter being 2 or 3 less than everybody I was fighting. Because if I was doing my job, I didn't need those Gs. I should be able to beat you without having to pull them. Now, the poor guy I'm attacking has to use them, or else he's going to get stroked. So
everybody understand what we're talking about. The Gs is the gravity force, right? Right.
We're under 1 G right now. So like when the elevator, and you feel it push down, that probably is like 1.2 Gs.
Okay. So that's the force of gravity pulling you back down to the earth.
Correct, yep.
Right. In regards to it. And the thrust is an accelerator that pushes you up. And
the thrust of an airplane, that's one of the things people are really surprised about. You actually get more thrust sensation out of a car.
Right.
And that's because of the rubber and the friction. In the airplane, when I throw it in full afterburner, it's a very linear acceleration, so it's very smooth. Now I'll go from like I said, 0 to 400 miles an hour in about 20 seconds.
Wow.
But it's not like a car where you're shifting and you get thrown back in the seat, and that's because of the friction in the tires. Whereas with the motor, it takes time for it to get it going.
Right. You mentioned afterburner. What's the difference between that and just regular jet?
Afterburners. Kind of like a supercharger on a car, probably. You get a significant increase in thrust, but the amount of fuel you're using is a phenomenal increase. So, the afterburner in we call military power is non-using the afterburner. So the internal, all the pressurization, it's all internal combustion essentially, and probably 20,000 pounds of thrust, 22,000 pounds of thrust. That afterburner gives me about 7 to 8, but my fuel flow increases 400%.
Wow.
So normally in an F-16 clean airplane, no external, I've got about an hour worth of gas. If I put it in afterburner and left it there, I'd be out in 10 minutes.
Wow.
I'd be going pretty fast.
Yes, right. How long do you use an afterburner, at any one given point?
Because of the fuel considerations, typically you're in afterburner for maybe 5 to 10 seconds to get up to a speed. You use it to recover from a speed. So if I do a hard G turn, I'll bleed airspeed down, and then I'll throw the afterburner in to get back up to my maneuver speed.
Okay. You're talking about flying and the experiences you've had. They've served you well, obviously. You miss it? Or are you still doing it?
You know, I get asked that all the time, and it would be like asking a hockey player if he misses skating. Flying itself became such a skill set that you didn't even think about, but it's taking that ability to skate along with the stick and the puck to get a goal, and with all your teammates and a bunch of guys trying to keep you from scoring. So the thing, the flying part, I don't really miss that much. I miss the excitement and adrenaline of the fight, I guess, of going out every day knowing, especially being so experienced, everyone wanted to knock me off. I had a big bullseye on my head. Everyone wanted to come back. My wingman wanted to do better than me. The other guys in the flight wanted to do better than me. The bad guys wanted to kill me, because we always train with adversary forces. So everybody wanted to outperform me, and every day I had to go out and prove that I'm better than everyone else. So you thrive off that pressure and that excellence, I guess. But I'm glad I'm not doing any more, because it wears down on you. But I guess I miss that part of it.
So were you considered Top Gun?
Top Gun is the Navy's program of what the Air Force calls fighter weapons school.
Okay.
They're similar schools. I went to the Air Force Top Gun, which is at Nellis Air Force Base in 1985. It's a young man's program. That was when I was a captain. It's a 6-month school where they take you from being an exceptional pilot and they make you basically a graduate. It's like going from a master's to a graduate degree. So I did that, and there's roughly 2 to 3 guys per squadron that have, we call the patch, the fighter weapons school patch. The Navy program's fairly similar.
But it sounds like you were number one with everything you did with it.
My luck of the draw, I think I'm a little bit attention deficit. Maybe that helps in the F-16 because there's a lot of things to pay attention to. But I was very fortunate in that the way I'm wired lent itself very well to what we do in a business. So I was always at the leading edge of whatever was happening and took advantage of that. Right. So night vision goggles, I was one of the first guys to get in night vision goggles. Wow. And then use that to train other people. I trained 5 different squadrons in how to use night vision goggles, including a month over in Greece, which was a lot of fun. Wow. So as I mentioned, the technology and the airplane evolving, because I was in and around that top tier, every time something new came out, they look around and go, so well, somebody's got to learn how to use this. And it was me. So I would get it and I'd figure it out, and then I would teach it to other people. And then next year, new system comes out, and there I am right in the front again.
Give it to Mike, he'll try it.
So yeah, a little skill and luck combined to allow me to keep doing that. Okay.
You retired in
2011.
2011, 6 years ago. What you been doing?
I was circumstances as they are. A good friend of mine who was worked in what the Air Force JTAC is a Joint Tactical Air Controller. It's the guys that have the radios on the ground that call in airstrikes. You see them in the movies all the time. And he had retired and was working in California, and he had the contract to train the Navy SEAL JTACs. And the contract called for an Air Force JTAC to be on the ground to train with them, in addition to a pilot. Well, he knew a lot of JTACs, but he didn't know a lot of pilots except me. So he called me up and he said, hey, Mike, do you know anybody be interested in this? I said, I got some free time on my hand. I guess let me give it a try. And I really enjoyed it. And I only do it about 8 weeks out of the year. And I've been doing that ever since. Good.
Where do you do it?
I go wherever they go. It's all field training. It's all outside. Usually I'm up high on a building or a hill, and I have a radio in my hand, and I role play all of the assets that they would have if they were in combat. So I may be F-16s, I could be bombers. I'm almost always some sort of surveillance type platform, whether that would be the Predator or drones that they're using, or some of the manned assets that they have in theater to listen to signals, to track guys on the ground. They have a variety of sensors and toys they use to support the guys on the ground. So those assets are very hard to come by. So I simulate those, and I'll be up on a hill and I will push the scenario and drive them. So as in the Air Force, I spent 25 years as an instructor. My job was to take young guys and teach them and get them to be able to go to combat and use their skills. So it's the same skill set, just different guys. And amazingly, teaching a SEAL's almost easier than teaching a fighter pilot.
Huh, interesting. So SEALs are teachable.
Amazing. We call them sponges is our term. It's what they absorb everything. I mean, I'll tell one SEAL something one day. The next day, a guy who wasn't even listening will have heard that from someone else and use what I told that guy. So,
and so the SEALs are the Navy, right?
Yes, Special Forces. Very similar to Green Beret, probably most likely comparison. They work in, generally speaking, 20-man size platoons, and of that platoon, 2 of the guys will be current and qualified JTACs, the radio controllers. They may have 2 or 3 others that were previously that are capable if they needed to get on the radio, but 2 of them are required to have all the currencies. So they have to get on the radio and control airplanes and work these skill sets about once every 3 months.
Okay. So A JTAC would that be considered a forward controller or an observer?
That's exactly what they used to be referred to. Forward air controller was the term they used. Now they've changed it around to make it with the J, the joint side of it. So the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, and all of the European NATO countries all have the identical requirements and procedures and spins or ROE that we use to train. So it's a joint program throughout all of the services for the airplanes. The pilots know it, and the guys on the ground all are on the same sheet of music. So they, the Vietnam Air Forward Air Controller, Forward Observers, are basically the same thing. Okay.
During Vietnam, if I remember correctly, the Forward Air Observers would be up in Pipers, Cubs type situation. They don't use those anymore.
They do have pilots in primarily A-10s, but also F-16s that are trained to do call-in airstrikes if there is no one on the ground.
Okay.
And they call that Forward Air Controller A, FAC-A. That's the terminology we use for that. So they're referred to as FAC-As. So like as an F-16 guy for a brief period, I was a FAC-A, and I would be able to go into Iraq and do like the scud hunting mission that they did. We didn't have a lot of guys on the ground. We knew where they were, the few that there were, but there was a vast amount of territory we had to cover, and we would fly around and we would look for the Scud missiles. This is, that they were afraid they were going to launch into Israel to draw them into the war, and our job was to, if we saw them any posture of getting ready to shoot, is to take them out. So as a forward air controller, I had the ability of dropping bombs on the ground and directing other airplanes to do it. So they still have the FAC-A, but they are not like they were in Vietnam, where there's Cessnas and bird dogs.
Bird dogs. I remember that term.
That program's gone away.
Okay. With the JTACs that are on the ground, are these individuals who have been slipped in? Are they active troops that are participating, or are they foreign troops who have decided to assist us?
It can be a variety of different ways. When we first started back into the fight against ISIS, and this is Obama was still the president, and he was very adamant that we weren't going to have boots on the ground. We had a base at Baghdad International, and it wasn't called boots on the ground because it was well away from the fight. So we were the guys I'm training, the SEALs, were actually working at a desk like this with a computer console, and they were getting the video feed from the fighters and from the Predators and from the drones, and they were using that, talking with the guys on the ground that were the Iraqi forces, and controlling airstrikes via telemetry. So they've since moved out and are now out in the field. They may be embedded with the Iraqi Defense Force. They may be with their own SEAL team, or they could be farmed out to whoever's out there. So pretty much anybody on the ground who we consider friendly is going to have a JTAC of some type with them.
With drones, or would they be considered JTAC instruments? I mean,
no, they are not. They would be delivery platforms. So JTAC would use them to deliver ordnance. The Predators, the one that's been out for a while, just carries the Hellfire missile, the small 25-pound charge. But the newer ones can carry the same thing I carry on my F-16. They're carrying 500-pound bombs now.
Oh my goodness.
But because of the limitations, and those guys are sitting in chairs at Houston or New York or down in Las Vegas, their situational awareness, their wherewithal of what's going on is high enough for them to direct airstrikes. It's much. It's very challenging. We worked the guys out of Baghdad. It's not what we desire. It's just too hard to look at a screen and keep track of what's going on 360 degrees. So that's why they really want that JTAC out on the ground, seeing what's going on. So the Predators, they could, if we needed it, we could robust them into that mission, but they're not currently doing it.
Will a JTAC get extremely close to the object, to the mission, or are they further back?
Well, our desire is to stay farther back, but sometimes we don't get a vote. So as the bad guys advance, or say you were in an ambush or something like that, they can bring ordnance in out to 100 meters out away from them. 300 meters is kind of what you hear in the movies all the time. Danger close, danger close.
Right.
Very real term. 300 meters is kind of the number we throw down of saying, okay, outside 300 meters, we should be fine. Even though pieces of that bomb can go up to 6,000 feet over a mile. That's outside 300 meters, you're pretty safe.
Right.
But they're routinely dropping ordnance inside that if they need to.
Okay. And it's usually 2 people on the ground? I mean, they have a spotter and somebody else and a
Well, there could
caller,
be
or just...
could be 100 guys.
Okay.
Some of the exercises I run where it's not just the JTAC now, it's the entire troop. You always hear a SEAL team. SEAL team, for those that know the Air Force, you have a wing. The wing doesn't deploy, you have squadrons deploy. So the SEALs deploy in troops, and a troop is between 50 and 70. Some of the exercises we run out in the desert above Yuma in Southern California, the whole troop size exercise, they'll have a task of coming into a village, and it may just be what they call a meet and greet. They come in and they just want to find the local guy, introduce themselves, and then inevitably in the scenario, things go bad and they get ambushed and there's an attack going on. Well, they'll have the JTAC that I'm talking to that's with the troop commander that's in the village, but they'll have observation positions with snipers, and they'll have 2 or 3 set up in different places. And each one of those could have a JTAC. So all of a sudden, as this notional airplane flying around, I may hear that the JTAC I'm talking to says, "Not eyes on," and he'll say, "Stand by for Trident 4-2," and then that call sign will come on, and he'll drive an airstrike against the snipers that are engaging him a couple hundred meters away from the village where he is. So we train to a variety of scenarios, hopefully way worse than we ever get into.
Yeah,
but 50 to 75 man firefights with multiple bad guys engaging and multiple elements counter engaging and moving around, and that's the task. Is that JTAC has to keep track of all of these guys where they are, so that me and my airplane, all I see is a black blob moving around in the night vision goggles. I don't know if that's a U.S. guy or not. So I'll see these 2 or 3 guys moving around, and I'll come back. I said, "Hey, I've ID'd movers," and I'll give him coordinates, and he'll come back, stand by, and he goes, "That's my friendly element maneuvering around here," and he'll stop that attack before it happened. So it's extremely critical. I mean, to know that we're dropping these and not killing guys, it's because the guys are trained very well.
Speaking of dropping and killing, people are always saying, you're a killer, you're, this, that, and the other. Thank God we're not doing that. It's calling people that now as we did in Vietnam.
Right.
But what effect does that have on you? I mean, in regards to knowing that someone potentially dies because of the work you do.
I shouldn't say it's easier. It's different to manage as an aircraft pilot, because the bombs I dropped from 20,000 feet, I see the explosion. Obviously, I'm dropping it on a building or a tank or a AAA piece that's shooting at me, and there's guys there. They're not doing me any favors, so I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I mean, they didn't have to do that, so I don't dwell on it too much. I do everything I can to make sure I'm only engaging as all military forces do. Only engage the people that they need to. But that's one of the bad parts of war, is that people are going to die.
Okay. Well, Mike, I tell you what, you have done a tremendous amount for our country, our military, and for training people that they're doing stuff to protect us all. And we thank you very much for your service and for your commitment to the military and to the well-being of our country. And so glad you've been with us this morning. Well,
thanks a lot, and it's an honor to be here. I mean, knowing the history and the heritage of the people in this facility and the wars you guys have fought, it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you again for your service, and keep up the great work, and stay safe.
Thank you.
All right. Well, folks, thank you very much, and we're going to go back to the studio at this point.